watching All 24 News World News Program. To the headlines. Algeria's foreign minister hails the unique partnership with Seoul. Meanwhile, the interior minister leads a high-level visit to Paris. And Chief of Staff Shanagdiha praises the growing momentum with Oman. Also on news tonight, bloody raids in southern Lebanon leave dozens dead. Massive displacement underway as bombardment threats continue, and international pressure builds to de-escalate. The U.S. military launches attacks on Iran. Iran retaliates by bombing a Kuwait U.S. base. Then Tehran threatens new fronts and holds all talks with Washington on the deal. The Polisario Front appreciates Lesotho's support, and France's biggest unions renew solidarity with the Sahrawi people. All this and more shortly. First off in our news tonight, Algerian Minister of State and Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf participated in the ministerial meeting of the Africa-Korea Partnership in Seoul on Monday. In his address, Minister Attaf praised the distinguished and unique strategic partnership between Algeria and the Republic of Korea. Consider it a pillar of the comprehensive Africa-Korea Partnership, as it covered projects extending beyond the bilateral framework into a continental scope.
الجزائر تعتز أيما اعتزاز.
Algeria takes great pride in the distinguished and unique strategic partnership that united with the Republic of Korea. This year, we are celebrating 2 decades since the establishment of this partnership. In Algeria, we regard our bilateral partnership as an integral pillar of the broader Africa-Korea partnership, particularly as it encompasses projects that go beyond the bilateral framework and carry a distinctly continental dimension. This is exemplified by a flagship initiative to establish the African Center for Information and Communication Technologies and Advanced Technologies.
وتكنولوجيات المتقدمة.
Minister Attaf renewed Algeria's firm commitment to making its strategic partnership with the Republic of Korea more distinctive, more dynamic, and more substantive.
الأولويات في المرحلة الراهنة.
The foremost priority at the present stage is to ensure that Africa is not left on the sidelines of these technological revolutions, as it was during the Industrial Revolutions while under colonial rule, and later during the Information Revolution while still grappling with the legacy and consequences of the same colonialism.
ومخلفات ذات الاستعمار.
Algerian Minister of State and Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf stressed the need to align Africa-Korea partnership goals with the development priorities of Agenda 2063. Speaking Monday at the meeting's opening in Seoul, Attaf praised Korea's commitment to supporting joint African action and to upholding African ownership of all cooperation efforts within the continent.
I would like to focus my remarks on 3 key aspects that I consider essential. First, we are encouraged by the clear alignment between the objectives of the Africa-Korea Partnership and the development priorities enshrined in Africa's Agenda 2063. In parallel, we highly value the Republic of Korea's commitment to supporting the various mechanisms of African cooperation in a manner that preserves African ownership of joint initiatives and partnership activities. Second, we appreciate the practical approach that characterizes this partnership, an approach reflected in the numerous cooperation programs and projects launched to advance Africa's development priorities across a wide range of vital sectors. Third and finally, we have high ambitions and even greater expectations for the Africa-Korea Partnership to help enable our continent meaningful participation in the transformations currently reshaping the global economy.
On the sidelines of the Africa-Korea Partnership Ministerial meeting in Seoul, Algerian Minister of State and Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf held talks with his Tunisian counterpart Mohamed Ali Nafti. Both sides discussed preparations for the upcoming Algerian-Tunisian follow-up committee meeting, which will review progress on implementing the outcomes of the 23rd session of the Joint High Commission, with the aim of advancing bilateral cooperation in line with the ambitions of both countries' leadership. In a separate meeting, Minister Attaf also met Benin's Foreign Minister Corina Mori-Bruni, congratulating her on her recent appointment and discussing ways to strengthen bilateral cooperation. particularly after the establishment of resident diplomatic representation. The talks also covered key regional issues, including developments in the Sahel region. Still with the diplomatic front, Algerian Minister of State and Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf held talks with Angolan Foreign Minister Tete Antonio, reviewing efforts to sustain momentum in bilateral relations following recent decisions by the two countries' leaders in Algiers to strengthen cooperation and expand sectoral partnerships. Minister Attaf also met Nigerian Foreign Minister Bianca Odomego Ojukwu, congratulating her on her appointment and discussing ways to deepen bilateral ties, along with the developments in the Sahel and joint efforts to support peace and development through integration projects. In another meeting, Minister Attaf held talks with his Egyptian counterpart, Foreign Minister Badr Abdel Ati, on strengthening relations, particularly in the economic field, as well as regional developments in the Arab world and the African Union agenda priorities ahead of the upcoming continental events in Egypt. Algerian Minister of the Interior, Local Authorities and Transport Said Sayoud arrived in Paris, where he was received by French Interior Minister Laurent Nunez. According to the Algerian Minister of the Interior, the visit comes at the invitation of the French Interior Minister, following his visit to Algeria on February 16 and 17. Sayoud is accompanied by a high-level delegation, with both sides set to begin implementing the agreed work program for this visit. Algerian Minister Delegate to the Minister of National Defense and Chief of Staff of the Algerian Army, General Said Chenegriha, was received in Oman by Deputy Prime Minister for Defense Affairs, Shihab bin Tariq al-Said, on the second day of his visit to the Sultanate. According to the Algerian Ministry of Defense, Chenegriha conveyed his greetings from the Algerian President and expressed appreciation for the warm welcome, highlighting the strong historical ties between the two countries. He also held talks with the Chief of Staff of the Sultan's Armed Forces, Lieutenant General Abdullah Raisi, at the Mortefia military base, where both sides reviewed military cooperation and ways to strengthen it in line with the ambitions of the two countries' leaderships. Both officials praised the level of bilateral military relations and reaffirmed their shared commitment to further developing cooperation.
The historical relations between Algeria and the Sultanate of Oman have consistently been characterized by brotherhood, friendship, shared belonging, and a common destiny, as well as alignment on issues of mutual interest. In recent times, these relations have gained strong momentum and notable dynamism, driven by the sincere will of the leaders of both countries. This will has been reflected in the exchange of high-level visits and the definition of the outlines of a promising strategic partnership. Our presence today also represents clear evidence of the great importance we attach in Algeria to strengthening ties of partnership and cooperation with the Omani armed forces, particularly in relation to the exchange of expertise and experiences in the fields of defense and security.
President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, chaired a working meeting on Monday on major hydrocarbons projects. The meeting covered the phosphate fertilizer complex, the integrated phosphate project for ammonia and urea, and the production of phosphate and nitrogen fertilizers. The integrated phosphate project will start production in the first quarter of 2027, right when the Annaba port expansion is finished and ready to export the first phosphate shipments. Moving on to the Middle East developments now, at least 14 people were killed and dozens injured in a series of Zionist airstrikes across southern Lebanon. According to the Lebanese National News Agency, an airstrike near the Jebel Amel hospital in Tyre killed 2 people and injured 23 others, while other strikes in Shahur also caused casualties. Further raids on villages in Nabatiya Governorate killed 6 people, with additional fatalities in Kfar Sir and Jazin in separate strikes. A massive exodus from southern Lebanon and Beirut's southern suburbs Monday after Zionist airstrike threats. That's an escalation of an already bloody ceasefire violations. Many residents fled following reports that Zionist entity planned to issue evacuation warnings for targeted areas. Zara Virginia has more in this report.
From southern Lebanon to Beirut's southern suburbs, the same scenes are playing out. People rushing away with their belongings, beginning yet another journey of displacement in search of safety from the Zionist aggression. Major roads out of the capital have been packed with vehicles leaving the southern suburbs, carrying families fleeing the bombardment and trying to escape with their lives before even knowing where they will end up.
This is the third time we are displaced, moving from a place to another. Now I'm heading to Tripoli, to the kind people of Tripoli.
Along the front lines in southern Lebanon, where occupation forces have advanced and tanks continue to shell residential areas, many residents can no longer leave their villages without assistance. The Lebanese army has been working to open safe passages and facilitate evacuations to protect civilians caught in the fighting.
Over there in the area where we are, the shelling is toward the Tahar Hills, around the Beaufort Castle. We're in these valleys over there, sitting in an orchard. You never know how the drones might carry out some airstrikes on us. They're not sparing anyone.
For many of those forced to flee, reaching temporary shelters has been far from easy. And even after arriving, there is little certainty about what comes next. Their future remains unclear, with no indication of when they might return home, as long as the Zionist occupation continues its attacks.
We can no longer return home. It's impossible. The city has been destroyed and we have lost many relatives and loved ones. The situation is extremely difficult.
Lebanon's towns and villages remain under the weight of the aggression. Residents continue to endure repeated displacements while grieving loved ones lost beneath the rubble of homes destroyed by Zionist occupation tank fire. For many, the trauma of loss is now inseparable from the hardship of being forced from their homes again and again.
Algeria strongly condemned the continued Zionist incursions into Lebanese territory, the targeting of civilians and infrastructure, calling it a blatant violation of sovereignty. The Foreign Ministry said the ongoing actions constitute a clear breach of international law and urged the international community to assume its responsibilities, deter further escalation, and ensure respect for the UN Charter and relevant Security Council resolutions, including the ceasefire resolution. The UN Security Council is set to hold an emergency session on Monday to discuss the escalation of the Israeli occupation attacks on Lebanon, despite the declared ceasefire agreement. Colombia, which holds the rotating council presidency this month, said the meeting will address the escalation and the ground incursion into southern Lebanon. A UN official from the Department of Political and Peace-Building Affairs is expected to brief members on the situation. The United States has presented a new ceasefire proposal for Lebanon. According to Axios, citing informed officials, Secretary of State Marco Rubio called for an end to Hezbollah attacks on the Zionist entity as a first step, in exchange for a halt to Zionist airstrikes on Lebanon. The report also said Lebanese Parliament Speaker Nabi Berri stressed that Israel should refrain from launching attacks first. And the United States is back to strike in Iran. SATCOM confirmed airstrikes on Monday. The targets were drone command sites in Hormuzgan province and the Qashm Island. The U.S. says the strikes destroyed air and ground defenses that threatened ships in Iranian waters. Iran's Revolutionary Guard announced Monday it targeted air bases hosting U.S. forces in Kuwait. Iran's Fars news agency said the attack was a response to what Iran calls U.S. aggression launched from that base against Sirik Island. Iran threatened Monday to target northern Zionist settlements if the Israeli occupation bombs Beirut's southern suburbs. The Revolutionary Guard Corps also threatened to open new fronts if Israeli occupation crosses what Iran calls red lines in Lebanon and Gaza. Iran halted talks with the United States as well. Tehran says no resumption until the Zionist entity stops its military operations in Gaza and Lebanon and withdraws completely. Iran also says closing the Strait of Hormuz is now a top priority. Iran's foreign ministry spokesman called on Washington Monday to stop imposing new unilateral conditions in their indirect talks. He said America's contradictory positions explain why the negotiations are dragging on, and he clarified Iran is not negotiating nuclear details right now, just focused on ending the war.
One of the obstacles to negotiations with the current U.S. administrations is precisely the frequent changes in positions and the contradictory and conflicting statement. There are, of course, different ways to describe this shift in positions. Naturally, whenever one side changes its position, the other side must also apply its own views and considerations accordingly.
U.S. President Donald Trump said Iran is eager to reach a ceasefire agreement, according to a post on his Truth Social platform on Monday. He added that a deal would be positive for the United States and its allies, saying the situation would go well. And in Tehran, skeptical Iranians say they no longer believe in a deal with the United States. Some say they would rather endure the bombings than making concessions to Washington. Marwa Bahlu reports now.
Behind the screens, Tehran appears as a bustling city moving through its ordinary routines, yet in its crowded streets and daily conversations, doubts linger and speculations grow over the fate of the nation and a region hanging in the balance. In one of his latest statements, US President Donald Trump said Iran wanted to make a deal, but amid renewed exchanges and mounting tensions, those remarks have done little to dispel the fears of war. For the Iranian citizens, a deal with the United States to end the conflict is unlikely, with many believing that a potential agreement would not be beneficial for the Iranian people.
I think given the broken promises the U.S. has made so far, this will not happen. The negotiations are merely an excuse for another war, for further encroachment on the country's territory, and they will not lead to any result.
Trump is pursuing his own interests, and in my view, an agreement with the United States will not be beneficial for the people or for the country.
The Trump administration has toughened its stance, demanding, among other things, the complete elimination of Iran's enriched uranium stockpile and the unconditional reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. Tehran has condemned these demands as excessive, accusing Washington of backtracking on its previous positions.
The enriched uranium we have belongs to us. The nuclear energy we possess depends on it. The Strait of Hormuz is like our uranium, like the rest of our land. It is our legitimate right. It belongs to us, and no one has any right whatsoever to have a say over it.
For Iran, unlike Washington, an agreement should extend beyond the nuclear and Hormuz issues to include the lifting of economic sanctions and ending the Zionist aggression against Lebanon. Accordingly, statements coming from Tehran repeatedly emphasize distrust of diplomatic rhetoric, insisting that only tangible actions can establish trust.
Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy Deputy Commander Mohammad Akbarzadeh said Iran will not retreat a single step in diplomacy or on the battlefield, claiming the end of U.S. dominance in the region. Speaking in Gorgon on Sunday, he stressed that Iranian sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz is non-negotiable, adding that the nuclear and missile files will now or will not change under pressure policies.
Iran will not back down on the diplomatic front, just as it will not back down on the battlefield. The American hegemony in the region has ended. The American president is trying to return the Strait of Hormuz to its pre-war status, but they will not put Iranian sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz up for negotiation.
In Gaza on Monday, Zionist forces targeted a bicycle in the Burid refugee camp. A young man was killed, another was wounded. Earlier, the Palestinian Ministry of Health said hospitals received the bodies of 2 martyrs and 40 wounded. The death toll from the Zionist ceasefire violation has now reached 932 martyrs and 2,859 wounded. Switching focus to another news story, the Saudi Foreign Minister Mohammed Yaslam Baysat says his country wants to strengthen friendship and cooperation with Lesotho. Mohammed Yaslam Baysat sent a congratulatory message to his Lesotho's counterpart on his new post. Baysat thanked Lesotho for its continued support for the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination and independence. A major French union is reaffirming its solidarity with the Sahrawi people. The General Confederation of Labour General Secretary Sophie Bennett met with the Sahrawi delegation Sunday ahead of the union's Congress. In her opening address, she said colonialism still hunts Africa and called for resistant attempts to suppress conflicts on the continent. And before we wrap up, let's catch up on more international news stories in the Newsroom Brief with Karim Masfai.
Sudan has strongly condemned the massacre carried out by the Rapid Support Forces in North Kordofan State, central western Sudan, which left dozens of civilians dead and others injured. The Sudanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs held the Rapid Support Forces and its international supporters fully responsible, describing the incident as a crime with severe humanitarian consequences. Kiev announced that it had carried out drone attacks targeting oil facilities inside Russian territory, including a fuel depot and an oil pumping station. Meanwhile, the Director General of Rosatom, the Russian State Nuclear Energy Corporation, Alexei Likhachev, described the Ukrainian attack on the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant as a deliberate nuclear attack. The Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Russia considers France's seizure of the oil tanker illegal, describing it as international piracy. Peskov reiterated Moscow's rejection of French claims that its actions comply with international law. The Algerian national team had a training session on Monday at the Sidi Moussa National Team's Technical Center in Algiers. Head coach Vladimir Petkovic oversaw the Desert Warriors' final workout before their departure to the Netherlands, where they will face the Orange in a friendly match on June 3rd in Rotterdam as part of both teams' preparations for the 2026 World Cup, which will start in 10 days.
That's all for tonight, but to catch up on any part you miss or get the latest updates, you can always visit our social media platforms. Thank you for tuning in. See you next time.